inside a towering glass office. Billionaire Richard Cavendish laughed loudly at a humble farmer's simple idea, turning dead land into food forests. But when the farmer said just 3 words, Dust Bowl 2, the laughter stopped. Those words weren't just a warning. They were a challenge that could destroy empires. What happened next wasn't just an investment decision. It was a battle for the future of our planet. And it all began with one old man's vision that shook the richest man in the world to his core. The elevator opened with a soft ding, but the silence that followed was thick and uncomfortable. The receptionist at Cavendish Industries raised an eyebrow the second she saw him, a man who clearly didn't belong. His boots were caked in dried mud, his jeans faded, torn at the knees. His flannel shirt hung loose over a frame thinned by hard work. Not gym memberships. He clutched a weathered leather briefcase like it carried his life's worth, because it did. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked, already preparing to reject him. "No, ma'am," the old man replied with a voice like gravel. "But if you tell Richard Cavendish that a farmer from Halberd County is here, he'll listen." The receptionist didn't hide her skepticism. But something in the man's eyes, not desperate, not arrogant, just sure, made her pause. She pressed the intercom button, half expecting to be laughed off. "Mr. Cavendish, there's a farmer here. Says he's from Halberd County. Says you'll want to hear him out." There was silence, then, incredibly, "Send him up." Richard Cavendish didn't do surprises. He didn't do walk-ins. He didn't do farmers. Yet somehow, the old man found himself standing in the middle of the most expensive office in downtown Chicago, staring at a billionaire who looked more annoyed than curious. Cavendish was every inch the mogul. Slick hair, sharp suit, an expression permanently carved between boredom and dominance. Behind him, a full glass wall showed the city below like ants on concrete. He didn't offer a handshake. "You've got 5 minutes," Richard said, pouring himself a drink. "Impress me." The farmer stepped forward and gently placed his briefcase on the long black conference table. He unlatched it, pulling out papers, maps and diagrams, each one meticulously prepared by hand. "I'm here about land," he said. 1,200 acres of it. Dead soil, dried up. Nothing grows anymore. Richard raised an eyebrow. "And you want me to buy it?" "No," the old man said. "I want you to help me heal it." The laughter came quick and sharp, bouncing off glass and steel. "Heal it." Richard chuckled. "What is this, a church sermon?" "I'm not a priest, old man. I'm an investor." "I know what you are," the farmer replied calmly. "And I know this might be the smartest investment you'll ever make." Cavendish rolled his eyes but didn't stop him. The farmer continued. "I've designed a regenerative model. Food forests, layered ecosystems. Trees, fruits, herbs, and all growing together. No replanting, no pesticides, no chemical runoff. The land repairs itself, and it feeds people for decades." "Sounds like a fairy tale," Richard muttered. "You want me to throw millions at dirt?" The farmer shook his head. "Not dirt, soil. There's a difference. Dirt is dead, soil breathes. It holds life. And right now we're running out of it." Richard leaned back, unconvinced. "And you think your little garden will change the world?" "No," the farmer said quietly. "But it might save it." Richard scoffed. "Cute, but I deal in numbers. Growth projections. Not compost." "You'll want to pay attention to this," the farmer said, "because your towers won't mean much when there's no food left to buy." Now Richard was getting annoyed. Soil panic doesn't move markets. "You've wasted enough of my time." The farmer paused, then slowly gathered his papers back into the briefcase. He moved to leave. Then just before the door he turned. "I was hoping you'd understand sooner. But if it helps, I'll leave you with 3 words." Richard rolled his eyes. "Here it comes." The farmer looked him straight in the eye, voice steady. "Dust Bowl 2." The words landed like a crack of thunder. The room went still. Even the rain outside seemed to pause. Richard stopped mid-sip. "Hey, what did you just say?" "You heard me," the farmer said, walking back toward the table. "We're already seeing signs. Topsoil vanishing, crop yields crashing, farmers quitting in record numbers. What you saw in the 1930s? That was a warning shot. This time it's global." Richard's smirk was gone. "You know why the first Dust Bowl happened, right?" The farmer continued. "Because nobody listened. They stripped the land, drained the water, and told themselves they could control nature. And when it came time to pay, it wasn't just farms that collapsed. It was banks, towns, economies. Cavendish was silent now, his fingers tightening around the glass. "And if we don't act," the old man said, voice low but unwavering, "your skyscrapers won't stop what's coming. They'll just fall harder." Richard looked down at the papers the farmer had left behind, pages showing maps, weather patterns, crop losses, water depletion, data that didn't lie no matter how rich you were. The farmer moved to the door again, slower this time. "I came to offer you a chance to be part of the solution," he said. "Not for charity, for survival. And if you pass, I'll find someone else. But don't wait too long, because the soil doesn't care about your deadlines, and it won't wait for your quarterly report." With that, he left. And Richard Cavendish, the man who could buy anything, build anything, own anything, and sat alone in his office, staring at the word soil scribbled across the top of a hand-drawn diagram, his glass of Bordeaux untouched, the echo of Dust Bowl 2 ringing in his ears. 2 days later, the numbers arrived. They came wrapped in digital reports, environmental forecasts, AI modeling projections, all prepared by Cavendish's research division. And for the first time in a very long time, Richard didn't like what the data said. Topsoil loss accelerating, Midwestern water tables collapsing, farmland abandoned at record levels, unfarmable land increasing by 12% annually. He sat in silence at the head of the boardroom table, skimming a satellite heat map blinking, read across vast portions of America's breadbasket. From Nebraska to Oklahoma, the land was drying out. The computer models projected collapses within 20 years. In some zones, it could be 10 years, not for tech, not for space, for food. His CFO entered cautiously. "Sir, about the farmer. You want us to file this under courtesy and move on?" Richard didn't answer right away. He stared out the window again. The sky looked different, lower, heavier. "No," he said finally. "Get me everything we have on regenerative agriculture. I want boots on that land in Halbert County immediately." The following week, Richard Cavendish stepped out of a sleek black Range Rover onto cracked red soil. Gone were the boardrooms and glass towers. In front of him stretched the 1,200 acres of forgotten land the farmer had spoken of, dry, brittle, lifeless. The farmer was already there. He wore the same boots, the same faded flannel, but this time he didn't carry a briefcase. He carried a spade. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said without turning. "I read the reports," Richard replied. "They weren't optimistic." "No," the farmer agreed. "But they're honest." They walked the land together. As they moved, the farmer pointed to the weeds, the dust, the faint green shoots struggling to breathe. "This land's not dead," he said. "It's just forgotten. You feed it right, it comes back. You force it, it'll fight you." Richard listened in a way few people had ever seen. No snark, no smugness, just a man realizing how much he didn't know. The farmer knelt, dug his hand into the dry soil, and let it crumble between his fingers. "You see this," he said. "This is the edge of collapse. When the earth turns to dust, everything else follows, and the food, the water, the people. But this," he tossed a handful gently toward a single struggling sapling. "This is how we fight back. Not with control, with respect." Back in Chicago, the board was panicking. Headlines had started circling about water wars, global food shortages, vanishing crop yields. Shareholders wanted tech innovations, climate-proof labs, vertical farms. They did not want trees. They especially didn't want Cavendish funding an experimental project in the middle of nowhere, with an old farmer who couldn't even work a PowerPoint. "Richard, this isn't our space," one executive argued. "We're investors, not environmentalists." But Richard sat quiet, studying a photo on the table, a patch of formerly dead soil, now bursting with cover crops after just 6 weeks of preparation. Earthworms, roots, microorganisms, the system was waking up. "We don't need to be environmentalists," Richard said finally. "We just need to stop pretending we're above the ground we walk on." The silence that followed was unfamiliar. No one argued. He stood, tapped the photo. "This," he said, "is the only asset class that matters now." The pilot project launched quietly. No press releases, no ribbon cuttings. Just the farmer, a skeleton crew of soil tech engineers, a few skeptical agronomists, and a handful of locals who'd stopped believing in change a long time ago. But little by little, things began to shift. Solar pumps powered up. Drones flew overhead monitoring plant health. Indigenous species were planted in careful layers: apples, walnuts, ground cover herbs, nitrogen fixers. Rainwater harvesting systems were installed. The earth, once gray and cracked, began to smell like life again. By month 3, bees had returned. By month 4, the first fruit sprouted. By month 5, a local news team picked up the story. A billionaire had bet millions on soil, and it was working. Back in Cavendish Tower, the same receptionist, who once rolled her eyes at the farmer, now watched. Her boss print reports with his own hands. Richard walked slower these days, thought longer, listened more. "Sir?" she asked one afternoon. "What changed your mind?" Richard paused, then looked out the glass again. "He said 3 words," he replied. "And for the first time I realized I had no answer." She nodded, not understanding, but sensing it was true. By the end of the first year, the transformation was impossible to ignore. The aerial drones that once mapped desolation now painted lush mosaics of green and gold. Satellite images showed rainfall patterns, correcting subtly around the reforested belts, microclimates forming, birds migrating back, soil carbon data climbing. The land, once labeled a graveyard of harvests, had begun to breathe again. And people were watching. Reporters, scientists, disbelieving politicians, agribusinesses with trembling spreadsheets. They came in waves, boots sinking into once barren fields now thick with clover and cover crops. Many brought doubt. All left changed. And at the center of it all stood the farmer, unchanged, unhurried, unmoved by the attention. "Weren't you ever angry?" one journalist asked him. "That no one believed you all those years?" The farmer shrugged. "I wasn't waiting to be believed," he said. "I was waiting to be heard." Richard Cavendish no longer laughed at ideas he didn't understand. Every month he flew out to Halbert County, not to direct but to learn. He wore old boots now, drove himself, ate meals with the farmhands. His hands still bore no calluses, but his heart had grown roots. One autumn afternoon, he and the farmer stood beside a line of saplings. The wind smelled sweet with ripened fruit. Children ran in the distance, part of a new after-school program teaching soil ecology. "This is bigger than a test farm," Richard said quietly. The farmer didn't look at him, just nodded. "You ever wonder why you came to my office that day?" Richard asked. "I didn't come for you," the farmer replied. "I came for the people you listened to." Richard smiled. It wasn't an insult. It was the truth. But not everyone was celebrating. In the towers of industry, the shift was triggering tremors. Lobbyists began whispering about overreach. Pundits painted Cavendish's pivot as radical, even dangerous. Market analysts questioned the long-term viability of soil-backed systems. A conglomerate offered to buy the Halberd project outright, then threatened legal action when their offer was declined. One evening, after a particularly heated shareholder meeting, Richard stood alone in his office watching the rain wash across the skyline. His assistant entered pale. "There's been an incident on the farm," she said. "Sabotage. Storage tanks slashed. Drone systems stolen. Some of the nursery crops were poisoned." He didn't speak, but something in him, something ancient and furious, lit behind his eyes. "Tell them I'm coming," he said. Tonight. The road to Halberd was slick with rain, the tires slicing through puddles like scalpels. Richard drove through the night, arriving at dawn. Police lights blinked like warnings at the farm gate. Officers took statements. Reporters hovered. And then he saw the farmer, standing in the damaged greenhouse, surrounded by withered saplings. Not angry, just still. Richard approached, soaked in rain. "They think they can silence you," he said. "They think they can silence the soil," the farmer replied, then knelt beside a scorched patch of green. He pressed his hand to it, closed his eyes. But the land remembers everything, even pain. The community responded faster than bureaucracy ever could. Volunteers came with shovels. Local nurseries donated replacements. Kids replanted by flashlight. No one waited for permission. They simply healed what had been hurt. And as dawn broke on the second day, a surprise arrived. A line of trucks, all from neighboring farms, filled with compost, seedlings, mulch, even livestock. One farmer, once a vocal critic, stepped forward. "My daddy said your ideas were fairy tales," he said. "But fairy tales don't bring back water. Yours did, so we're in." One by one, the others nodded. The Halberd farm had stopped being a pilot. It had become a movement. Back in the city, headlines flipped. The soil revolution, how one farm rewrote everything. From laughter to legacy, Billionaire's unlikely partner shifts. Agriculture's future. I saw the land breathe again. Farm worker describes miracle turnaround. Investment inquiries flooded in. But this time Richard was ready. He formed a new branch, Cavendish Earthworks, focused solely on soil restoration, clean food systems, and regenerative land use. But the farmer set the rules: no monocultures, no shortcuts, no pretending the earth is a machine. Each new project had to pass his standards, not because he was stubborn, but because the truth doesn't compromise. That winter, Richard invited the farmer to speak at the World Climate Forum in Oslo. CEOs, prime ministers, and tech billionaires gathered in sleek suits and earpieces. The farmer stepped onto the stage in his old flannel and worn boots. And for 6 minutes he spoke not with graphs but with gravity. You can build towers to the sky, he said. But if the ground gives way beneath you, they'll fall. You can hoard water in tanks, but if the soil dies, the water disappears. You can print food in labs, but if you can't grow it from the earth, you've lost the story of how we survive. The room fell into breathless silence, and then came the ovation, the longest in the forum's history. 2 years later, Halberd County didn't look like Halberd County anymore. What had once been scorched farmland now bloomed with life. Layered forests of fruit-bearing trees, medicinal herbs, rain-fed canals, mushroom groves, even grazing zones where cows and chickens roamed freely beneath the canopy. It wasn't just a farm. It was a self-sustaining ecosystem, living proof that healing the land could feed people, stabilize economies, and restore lost communities. And now it had been replicated. From Kenya to Kansas, Bolivia to Bihar, the Dust Bowl 2 model, once mocked as naive, had become the blueprint for global resilience. Not charity, not idealism, smart survival. Even global food giants had started, mimicking its methods to meet new carbon regulations. But they never quite captured the soul of it, because the soul wasn't in the model, it was in the man. The farmer never sought fame. He refused interviews on cable shows, declined honorary degrees. He didn't own a cell phone, didn't care for tweets. He just worked quietly, consistently, patiently. The only thing he accepted publicly was a plaque, mounted on the edge of the very field where he'd first told the billionaire about the coming collapse. It read, "Here stood the first root of the last chance." As for Richard Cavendish, the man who once laughed in his glass tower, he changed in ways the world didn't expect. He sold his private jet, converted his high-rise into an open-source innovation lab for soil tech startups, transferred 30% of his fortune into a land restoration fund he couldn't withdraw from. He even started a podcast, not to lecture but to listen. Every week he featured farmers, indigenous elders, and soil scientists from around the world. The intro was simple: "Welcome to the ground beneath your wealth." One fall morning, Richard returned to Halberd. It had been months since he'd visited. Things had become busy again: conferences, partnerships, new territories. But the moment his shoes touched that familiar soil, he felt the silence again. That same sacred quiet that first made him stop laughing. He found the farmer sitting by the old irrigation ditch, whittling wood with a pocket knife. "Place looks different," Richard said. "No," the farmer smiled. "You do." They sat for a while in silence. The breeze carried the scent of apples and sun-warmed leaves. Then Richard turned. "Why did you really come to my office that day?" he asked again, softer this time. The farmer looked out across the fields, then pointed toward a group of children, planting young fig trees along a sloped terrace. "For them," he said. A long pause followed. "You had the power to either feed their future or bury it. I figured it was time someone asked you which one you planned to do." Months later, the Cavendish Foundation released a landmark report titled, "The Soil Economy: Investing in What We Stand On." It wasn't filled with marketing, just truth. In the final page, Richard wrote a short letter. "I used to think value was created in the cloud, in code, in things we could sell and scale. But it turns out, the most valuable thing we have is something most of us stopped noticing. The soil. It fed your grandparents. It holds the water. It filters the air. It anchors the world. I once laughed at a man who asked me to believe in dirt. Then he showed me what grows from it. Now I ask you, what are you standing on?" Years passed. The farmer grew slower, but his eyes never dimmed. When he finally passed, and quietly, under the shade of the oldest fig tree, thousands gathered from across the world. Farmers, Students, scientists, CEOs, children. No. Suit was too rich. No hand too clean. They buried him in the soil. He had healed a living soil that would now feed generations. The next spring, a small sign appeared beside his grave. Written in wood and love, it read, "He didn't save the world. He reminded it how. If you believe in stories that feel real, that hit deep and change the way we think, then hit subscribe right now. Because the next story might not be about someone else. It might be about you.